Let's jump right in. This is the state of social media for 2019. This is a summary of the year, kind of where we stand going into 2020. Let's kick things off with Facebook. So what we have this year is 2.8 billion users on all of Facebook's property. So that's WhatsApp, Instagram, Messenger. So this is roughly 80% of the online audience outside of China that they've. So this is why Facebook, when you see Facebook is growing very slowly today and Instagram starting to grow very slowly, this is why, because this number, if you take China out of the equation where Facebook is banned along with Iran and North Korea, Facebook has saturated the entire online audience on its platforms already. And most of that is 2.2 on Facebook. All right, so this number is very important. These were the most recent quarterly updates. Another thing, even though you are seeing slow growth from Facebook, these last 2 quarters within that red circle, their 2 biggest profitable markets, North America and Europe, were actually up above average. So it looks like a very small increase on this chart because Facebook is so massive, but it's millions of people that they're still adding per quarter. And for them, that's not a big dip, but if you put that into any other social network, it would be a huge growth number. If it was Twitter's numbers, Snapchat's numbers, Reddit's numbers, it would be a massive growth number. So even though it's hard to see the growth that Facebook is still establishing, mostly around the world, mostly international, outside the US, they're still killing it. They're still establishing these new user bases. So even though in the news, Facebook is seeing a lot of challenges, shall we say, to be very kind, they are still dominating and growing their market share all around the world. One of the things that they focused on this year, more than anything else, was improving their Messenger app. They're treating Messenger as its own platform. They're rolling out amazing ad products built around Messenger, which I think everyone should be looking at. Click to Messenger as an ad product is really showing a lot of results for a lot of different business types, B2B, B2C, et cetera. This was the most recent video they did talking about the new improvements to Messenger.
Only one direction, and it's straight to the top. Did I forget to mention we'll save the day? We do it that way, we do it that way.
Yeah, that's just how we do it. I swear ain't nothing to it. H-O-W-W, we do it, nobody can touch the kingdom that we're ruling.
You notice a lot of like chat, WhatsApp, friendly themes here. Colors, GIFs, filters. They're really trying to take what they've seen be successful in WhatsApp, what they've seen be successful in Snapchat, and bring it into the Messenger app. They're also making it more friendly for brands, and they're making it much simpler, much quicker, and much more attractive to a younger audience. So Messenger and WhatsApp are still the #1 messaging platforms in the world, and this is going to become even more important as they merge those platforms with Instagram direct messages as well throughout this year. Okay, so a little bit of a quote from Mark Zuckerberg. This is something that we've seen all the social networks trending toward, which is platform health is kind of what we're calling it. We talked about it a lot at the conference last year about how they're trying to improve the experience on the platforms for their users. This quote kind of represents a big pivot for Facebook. This is, in what Mark Zuckerberg would say, the 5th version of Facebook. So the quote is, "We don't let any of our news feed or Instagram feed teams set goals around increasing time spent." And that's new. So previous to this year, even at the beginning of this year, if you watched a stupid video, they would start feeding you more stupid viral videos because videos are a ton of time spent, which means you're going to see more ads. It's more profitable for them. But what they realized is it was a negative experience for people. It was a negative experience both for advertisers and for the users. So now they're pulling back from that in their algorithm. You'll notice that they are specifically saying that about the feeds and not about stories. They have not commented on that, but what that tells you is the feed is most important to them, and it's most important to user health, kind of user thoughts around platforms right now. And that they're kind of keeping in their back pocket that they can do that in the Instagram story, Facebook story algorithms if they want. And what that means is eventually they might start feeding you stories based on algorithms, even more so than they kind of do today, which would look a lot like TikTok. So they're kind of leaving that out there so they can do it. But what they're focusing on instead of time spent is comments. They're focusing on personal touch points and comments. So we talked about this at last year's Social Fresh as it just kind of launched on Facebook, that comments were very important. Since they made this very big announcement and had mentioned it in every single earnings report, it's even more important. So if you're not generating comments with your Facebook content, you should rethink that strategy and try to come up with content, try to even post fewer pieces of content organically on Facebook that produce more engagement and more engagement amongst smaller, tight-knit communities, people that know each other, groups that relate to each other. That's going to work much better. Another big move that we've seen, this trend is really over 18 months. The image on the left, you'll notice, is what Facebook used to look like. A very pleasant Facebook feed with nothing at the top around stories. We move forward. They add stories to the top. They copied it from Instagram. We copied it from Snapchat, right? They think it's going to work really well on Facebook, so they did a little test. That test went well. They increased the size of it. Over 18 months, the story size on the screen of Facebook has gone from 0 to 10% of the screen, to 20% of the screen, to 30% of the screen today. So what this tells you is that Facebook sees this as their future. This is the most important real estate in their app, the most important, the top of the home screen that loads when you open the app. And they've increasingly given that space to stories over and over and over. And they've increasingly increased the size of those images, increased the dynamic nature of those images, and they're really forcing you to use stories whether you want to or not on Facebook. And it's working. The Facebook Story product was really not great when it launched. And there was a lot of really not great content from brands, from users still trying to experience it. It's much better today. Ads are running on Facebook Stories today. They're working pretty well. It still hasn't rolled out super wide, but this is a future place where story ads are going to work well, based on the numbers we're seeing. And of course, these numbers are actually from Q1. Facebook Stories became tied, one of the number one story platforms out there. Of course, tied with the two other Facebook-owned properties, Instagram and WhatsApp, all of which are 2.5 times Snapchat. I'd say these numbers are probably much bigger today. We haven't had Instagram numbers in a while, and we haven't had any Facebook Story numbers or WhatsApp Story numbers in a while. So I expect Facebook Stories is probably today the number one stories channel. We'll see how that plays out when we get new numbers in the next couple quarters. And then one important thing I wanted to flag, something that Facebook spent Q2 talking about, is Facebook Watch. Facebook Watch and IGTV are basically thought of as the same thing to Facebook. It's long-form video. One's vertical for Instagram, one's horizontal on Facebook. They want you to start watching videos in the feed and then go to Facebook Watch or IGTV to finish longer-form experiences. These are specific quotes from Facebook, from their earnings call, about what works with Watch. They are promoting Watch videos, and what they want is serialized content. They want you to produce weekly content. They want you to produce content that people are going to Facebook Watch to watch, and that they are spending at least a minute focused on that content. So if they watch 3 seconds and they go away, Facebook is not going to share that video in the feed as much. If you get somebody to engage for 1 minute, Facebook will promote that, especially if you're loading into the Watch platform. So take a look at that. I think it's a big opportunity. It is a high production ask to produce weekly content that's longer form, but if you have that ability, look at it. Even if you just want to test something that's not weekly, but just test out Facebook Watch, I think it's a great engagement opportunity right now, and probably for the next year or two at least. Okay, so let's jump into a few updates from Instagram. One important thing that we saw recently, and we expected to happen pretty quickly, was Facebook copying TikTok. Facebook played around with it a little bit, but Instagram rolled out this test tool a couple months ago. This is what has become the Threads app, which, if you haven't seen the news, launched earlier this week in Brazil. I'm sorry, the Reels app. Thread is another thing they copied from someone. The Reels app rolled out in Brazil. They're testing it there first. It's basically another camera feature like Boomerang or something that's already in the Instagram story user experience. And it's the creation side of TikTok. It's not the feed that you scroll through, but it's the creating, editing tools, being able to edit specific frames and publish those all together with special effects as one story frame. So it's a little technical, but if you use TikTok, you'll recognize a lot of these features. It's very much a copy of the TikTok user experience. Of course, the big news is that Instagram is hiding likes. It happened in Canada first, then it happened in 6 other countries throughout Europe and Asia, United Kingdom, Australia, they're testing it. They're also testing the United Kingdom for Facebook hiding likes. So this is a steady trend. Removing metrics that are visible, especially vanity metrics, is something Facebook is testing on every platform in a lot of different ways. YouTube's testing it as well. And it's coming to America. Yay! So if you like Instagram like counts, you will see that rolling out. If you haven't seen it already, it's rolling out slowly to US audiences on Instagram. So what does this mean? It means they want to improve the experience. Everything they're talking about is, we don't want people stressed about my post does not get likes. We don't want users focusing on influencers that are only driving likes. We want comments. Comes back to the same healthier platform, better engagement, right? So comments are still going to be a major metric, and not just comment count, but the length of a comment, the number of likes a comment gets, the replies to that comment. The more engagement a comment gets, the better the post does, the better that comment does. Also, this is going to be good for social ads. People are going to push more stuff to social ads. It's going to be good for influencers, I think. I think it's a really important test for them to do on a broad scale. All right, so big emphasis in Q3 for Instagram was the Explore tab. Sheryl Sandberg let us know that 60% of Instagram users are using the Explore tab at least once a month. They're rolling out ads in the Explore tab. They're rolling out stories, IGTV. There's a great quote from this last quarter where Mark Zuckerberg compares TikTok to the experience of the Instagram Explore tab, which came off as a little tone deaf. They're completely different. Most Instagram users would not think they're the same. He's talking about algorithms mainly. But I think they're looking at the Explore tab as a potential user experience change for the platform. So look at that opportunity going forward. There are ad opportunities there as well once you click on content in Instagram Explore. This is a great stat I thought was really interesting from Rival IQ, and it's talking about, we're seeing a lot of reduction in numbers of engagement in the feed. People are seeing less engagement, less content. But what you don't see unless you dig into your metrics is that the feed is still seeing more eyeballs than stories. If you look at all these numbers, these are views in the story versus views in the feed. Blue is the feed. Red is the story. It's by page size, the size of the audience. And across the board, the feed is still getting more exposure to more people. They may not be liking it. They may not be commenting on that, but they're seeing it more. So don't abandon the feed. Treat it as an awareness engine right now. If you're not getting engagement, still post stuff because people are going to see it. This is from earlier in the year from their benchmark study. I talked to Rival IQ. They said these numbers are still holding up. This trend is still true today for Instagram, and they'll have a new report out soon. Okay, so this is the trend line that we're seeing. This is a Bank of America report. And basically what we're seeing is lower engagement across Instagram. This is almost identically matches what we saw from Facebook maybe 3 years ago, where organic engagement is slowly but surely and consistently dropping to zero. So what does that mean? That means you are going to get less engagement in the feed. You probably need to look more into ads on Instagram. Look at stories if you're not doing that, because that's a free place to get exposure right now. And try to generate more comments on your Instagram content. And lastly, we're seeing a little bit of a dip that, again, is very consistent with Facebook's growth. This is natural. This is not really a super negative number for Instagram, but their downloads have been down since last year, about 9% year over year. What we're seeing is they're over 1 billion users, right? So they're reaching market saturation in a lot of countries. So they're hitting the same headwinds of growth just because of market size that Facebook reached a few years back. So it's actually a good thing for them because their market size is continuing to grow, continuing to be healthy. And then lastly, this ad format from Instagram I think is really important. If you haven't seen this, they're rolling out influencer ads broadly. Anybody can do this now. They're called branded content ads. If you see at the very top, paid partnership with the influencer, I've seen a lot of these. I've seen B2B companies doing these now, and they work really well. What this allows you to do is take any influencer you're working with, take their content and advertise it to anybody else. So you can turn any influencer post into an ad and advertise it to anything else that you would typically run your ads to. Your lookalike audiences, any broad metrics and targeting that you have on Facebook, on Instagram, et cetera. Very useful, and paired with the right influencer, paired with the right content, could be a very powerful kind of word of mouth promoted tool for most businesses. Oh, there it is, paid partnership. All right, so let's jump into Twitter. A big change for Twitter this year was how they treated their metrics. So for Twitter, they went from monthly active user, which was their most important metric, to monetizable daily active users. It's a mouthful. So we have monthly active users, MAUs. We have daily active users, which is kind of the new standard for most social networks to judge kind of their growth and their health. Twitter, those numbers really are not good for either of those categories for them. They haven't been for a while. They've been pretty static. But what Twitter is really good at is showing growth in the number of people that see ads on their platform. That is their MDAU. So that's what that means. Monetizable daily active users is the number of people they can show ads to on their platform daily. And that metric has been really great for them over 3 years. They've been growing at around 10% or higher. This last quarter, they had their highest growth number in that MDAU number since 3 years ago. So the changes that Twitter has been doing in platform health, the changes they've been doing in engagement and trying to encourage more commenting, less spam, getting rid of bad actors, is paying off for them. And as a Twitter user, as my favorite social network, I've seen it. I've seen the comments and the discussion really improve on the platform, and it's playing out in their metrics. Their ad dollars are up, so they're doing a good job. It's a really engaged audience, and they've got some new ad products that I think a lot of businesses should be looking at. Here's what that number looks like in millions. Their MDAU has gone from 109 to 139 over 2 years. And as you can see, over the last couple of quarters, it started to tick up at a much higher rate. Interesting change this year, and I don't think it's something that a lot of people have noticed. I've seen more people using it more recently, is the Twitter camera user experience changed around Q2, where they had a vertical video that you could swipe to use the camera as a full screen. I'm going to show this video real quick, and then I'll tell you what I think it means.
Yes, no.
Yep.
Yes, no, maybe so. Like a rocket gonna blast off, watch me go. Come on now, let's work. Come on now. Come on now, let's work. Check it out. Come on now. Come on now, let's work.
So Twitter has equivocated a lot of whether they want to have anything that looks like a story feature, right? If you look at their Explore tab, they've played with actually using those Explore featured stories as a swipe story format somewhat, and then they took that away, and now they put it back occasionally. Most of the trending topics you scroll through like you would scroll through Twitter. So they really have tested a lot of different things. I'm not sure where they're going with it, but this feature allows them to have a swipe to full screen camera, and it kind of gives them, besides the fact that it gives them the opportunity for users to do full screen video and just be more native to the mobile experience, it gives them a base of something they could build on if they want to roll something out that looks even remotely like stories. If they want to add in video editing, things like that, like a frame-by-frame video editing, this would be the place where they would build that feature, and they could add on a user experience like other story platforms have done. So it's interesting that they're thinking about that they're building this, and I think I would love for them to experiment more, not in the way that Instagram Stories works or Facebook Stories works, but something that's useful and native to Twitter itself. Great study that Twitter paid for and had run recently in this last quarter showed that Twitter is known more, people know what Twitter is for more than they know what other social networks are for. If you ask people what they love about certain social networks, more people align that Twitter is for breaking news and what's happening now. And on other platforms, they're kind of confused why they would go to Facebook, or they disagree on why they go to Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, et cetera. So Twitter is establishing a great brand identity, and they're growing their audience. And when it comes to their ad performances, this is a stat that kind of backs up what I told you earlier. Twitter did a test running similar ads across all the social networks, and Twitter users are 20% more likely to recall the ads that they see on Twitter, even if they see those same ads on other channels. And they are also 21% more likely to say those ads influence their buying decision. So Twitter ads are coming across more influential for users that use multiple social networks and are active on that platform. All right, so a few other social networks let's touch on. Really a quiet but big year for LinkedIn. I think they've done a lot of great things. Their video product rolled out, their live video product rolled out, and video ads rolled out this year. It was huge for them. This is from Q1 or Q2, these numbers, but they've been pretty consistent all year. Their revenue has been going up about 30% every quarter from LinkedIn itself. These are reported by Microsoft, who owns LinkedIn. And they attribute most of this revenue growth to video ads, and a lot of the engagement growth to video in the feed as well. All right, Snapchat. Snapchat now reaches 90% of all 13 to 24-year-olds. Do we have any 13 to 24-year-olds in the audience? A couple? All right. So Snapchat has had a little bit of a resurgence this year. They had a couple years of stalled growth because their Android app sucked, and most people use Android around the world. And that was a purposeful decision on their part, but they fixed that, and they've seen good growth since then. This shows you that they still have a lock and key on the U.S. younger audience. There's TikTok eating away at that a little bit. There's most young people are using a lot of social networks, but Snapchat as a messaging platform still owns that audience. So this is what Snapchat's growth looked like over the last several years, and you'll see they definitely stagnated for about 18 to 24 months. Those last three quarters is when they fixed their Android app. So most of that growth is coming from a better user experience for Android and people that are using that as their default phone. Also, a little bit of that growth is coming from some viralness that they've seen from their face swap filters, their old age filters, their turn yourself into a baby face filters. Those things went viral, and they got tons of downloads from those throughout the year. This stat's really interesting. This is one potential negative for Snapchat, which is they're almost out of money. This is how much money, cash on hand, they've had for the last several quarters. That last bump is not from ad revenue or user growth. It's from a huge loan that someone named Tencent, a Chinese company, put into Snapchat. Tencent now owns 10% of Snapchat and 10% of Reddit, in case you're paying attention. So China is definitely moving into the market and keeping US companies out of their market. So I think we'll see some political tensions around that have already started to brew up a little bit. If they can turn it around the next year or two, this isn't a big problem. If they see increased competition that slow down these bumps in growth, this will become a big problem for them because they are not profitable and they're having to continuously take out loans to stay profitable. Another small problem is TikTok has started to compete with them one-on-one. If you go into the TikTok app, they're actually priming you to share TikTok content for Snapchat as their #1 shared suggestion to where to share the content because they see this audience as prime for the taking. These are search trends for how much people are searching for Snapchat versus TikTok. And as of last week, over the last few weeks, TikTok is now searched for more than Snapchat in the US. So speaking of TikTok, this is the growth number for TikTok and number of downloads over the course of 2 years. This is growth they paid for. These are ads that they're running across the world. They're backed by the most highest valued startup in the world. And they're buying their way into awareness, and it's worked for them. And they've stayed consistently in the top 4 or 5, usually top 1 or 2 on both Android and iOS. From their last kind of sales pitch to US marketers, this was a direct quote from Snapchat: "We don't spark trends, we set them on fire." They're really pitching their viralness, their ability to influence culture, their ability to influence content on other social networks because of how friendly they are with sharing content. And a big piece of that is their daily challenges. Dave from Washington Post is going to talk about that tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to that presentation. Those sponsored challenges that you see from brands, from fashion brands and movies and things like that, are really affordable right now. If you have the money to spend, they're $150,000 they start at. That doesn't sound affordable for every business, right? But when you compare that to sponsored trends on Twitter, when you compare it to larger ad buys on other platforms, it's really a pretty interesting opportunity if the audience aligns for a big push that you're doing. So think about that if you have the opportunity to look at those. Some interesting numbers from that same deck that they sent out. 70% of the people, almost 70% of the people are very young, 16 to 24. One number that I find very interesting, this is TikTok users in the US, is 54% are on iOS. That is that's not normal. That's way above average for social networks. So what that tells you is the audience using TikTok, at least in the US right now, is both young, very young, which we kind of knew, right? And they're also affluent. They're very affluent because iPhone users are typically spending a lot more. All right, so speaking of Dave, there he is. One thing I love about TikTok is the comments. TikTok really was the first social network that had vertical video as its primary media format to work well with comments. There's no comments on Instagram stories. There's no comments on Snapchat stories that are public, that create community, that create engagement, that's viewable for other people. This is the first user experience I've seen to really get it right. And because of that, the engagement in a lot of TikTok in the comment sections works really well. They have a good reply feature. You'll notice this is Washington Post replying to a comment that it's kind of quoting below the comment that they're writing. Washington Post does this really well. I'm sure Dave will talk about his strategy behind that. I think the comments in general are a great differentiator on the TikTok platform and the way they treat it. And then lastly, this is one of my favorite TikToks we'll close out with. This is the Adele challenge that we've seen. My advice to you, if you want to jump on TikTok and you want to do a video and you're not sure where to start, just to play around with it, to test it, do the Adele challenge. It's simply playing the Adele song, focusing on one object, and then panning as kind of the chorus comes into her song to dozens or hundreds of thousands of that object. So this is one example. They've done it with gummy bears, they've done it with Legos, they've done it with all kinds of things.
Never mind, I'll find someone like you. I wish nothing but the best for you.
So I counted, I think it's 15 dogs and 1 cat. I could be a little off, but that's a lot of dogs just to get to sit all at once for a video? How did they do that? Okay. So test that out. I think it's great. I was talking last night about this trend, this challenge. A lot of challenges and memes live and die very quickly. This one keeps coming back on TikTok over and over. So I think this is safe to play around with and really experiment with, and it's fun. So that is our state of social media for 2019. If you're interested in more in-depth reporting like this from us, this is something we're doing quarterly for a lot of mid to large brands. Again, shoot me an email, talk to me, let me know, and thank you for your time. Thanks, guys.